Secretary, I just want to revisit some evidence from the last round of estimates about the budget. You might remember we had an exchange about apportioning various causes of increased spending, and in particular I wanted to know whether you could distinguish between government decisions and variations that had accumulated over time. You said, and I quote, "That would be a very difficult thing to do and that it's not clear to me how you would draw that distinction." You also said, "I've never seen an ex post assessment of how you would distinguish the outcome or the change in the outcome between policy decisions and estimates variations." Have you had any further reflections about that exchange since then?
Senator, we were so not in particular. I mean, I stand by what I said. What we were talking about, what you were asking me about was, I think you asked me about what the impact of decisions that have been taken by the government since they came to power were on the final budget outcome in 24/5, and that's what I said was that's a very hard thing to isolate, to actually determine, and I stand by that.
But it's not hard at all. You do it in the budget papers every year, and your colleague, Mr White, was able to take me through the relevant tables in the budget papers that do exactly that. It's a routine thing.
So, Senator, what I said and what I stand by is that every year the budget papers in the reconciliation tables outline the difference, the distinction in that year between policy decisions that have been taken and estimates variations that have been that are affecting the underlying cash balance. But, for example, and I think we talked about this last time, a policy decision could have been taken in the October budget of 2022. The estimate of that impact, that policy impact, was in that reconciliation table in that year. If the cost of that policy was subsequently varied because economic conditions have changed or because the particular policy parameters, there were policy-specific things that had changed, then that will be reflected in a change in an estimates variation in the subsequent year. So in order to determine what the net impact of that particular policy decision was flowing all the way through to, say, the 24/5 final budget outcome, I would need to look line by line about the policy decision and all of the estimates variations that related to that policy decisions and to net them out. I'm not trying to be difficult here. I'm just trying to be clear that this is we do our very best in the budget process to distinguish and to clearly articulate in each budget what the difference between policy decisions and estimates variations are. But if you want to add them up over time, and you can add them up, you just need to be careful about what the conclusion is that you're drawing or the inference is that you're drawing from them. That's all the point that I was making.
Sure, but not only was Mr White subsequently able to help me when I asked these questions to him in a subsequent session of that estimates, and he had advance notice that I was going to ask it, obviously, because I asked it to you first. But on notice to one of the questions that I asked, Treasury provided details going back even further than I'd asked for. I think back to decisions taken in 2017 or 2018 on the 24-25 financial year and broke it out by government. So you said it was a very difficult thing to do. You've never seen an ex post assessment how you would distinguish, and that it's not clear how you draw the distinction. But Treasury just does this as a matter of course. It's a routine thing in the budget papers.
So in that answer to the question on notice, we are very explicit. We say it is not possible to calculate for a particular year the initially costed impact of all policy decisions plus subsequent estimate variations to those decisions. What we have done is we have reproduced for you in that table the policy decision line from each of those budgets, and you can add those up if you want to, and you can. But if you want to then infer something about whether that is what the total impact of policy decisions has been, I would just counsel you that you need to be careful, because it doesn't capture all of the variations which would take place after a policy decision.
Have you also counselled the Treasurer to be careful? Because, as I pointed out to you at the time, on page 1 of Budget Paper 1, the government makes the same claim.
So you can, as I've said, you can, and the government can add up difference. It depends on what you're doing with these numbers. That's the point I'm trying to make, or the inference that you're trying to conclude from them. So I had thought that what you were, I think, and this is where you were going yesterday, I think, was a suggestion that were it not for these policy decisions, what the underlying cash balance would have been. And I think that that's just not something that I think is an inference that you can draw from adding up the policy decisions in a series of reconciliation tables.
Well, if that's true about what I say, then it's also true of the most frequently repeated talking points of the Treasurer and the Finance Minister. They make claims all the time about the effect of decisions they've taken and the improvement that has given to the budget bottom line. It is central to their political argument. So have you provided this advice to them as well as you're providing to me?
So the same advice. So the advice I'm providing to you, and it's the same advice that I would provide to them, is you can add up these lines. And I mean, one of the figures that is used by government, which is to look at each budget estimate as to what are the increases in tax revenue, which have been measured in each of those in each budget. That is a factual statement in each budget. That is the variation in each of those, and if you add them up, that is indeed an estimate of what that total change has been. Senator, it's a question of the inference that you're going to draw from it, not the actual number themselves. That's the only point that I'm making.
Sure, but the Treasurer and the Finance Minister say all the time that the effective decisions taken by the Albanese Labor government has improved the budget bottom line by X billion dollars, that we've banked this proportion of additional revenue as saves. So you're saying we should take those claims with a grain of salt?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that if you are making a factual statement about adding up elements of the reconciliation tables, or in the budget papers adding up the savings and reprioritisations estimates that have been made at each budget, and I think that's the only claim that the government's making, that these are the savings and reprioritisation decisions that we have made at each budget, and we're adding them up into an aggregate, and that's what they're presenting.
I think their claim is much stronger than that. They claim that this is evidence of better budget management compared to their predecessors, and they say that the 2022 PFO numbers are what their predecessors would have delivered had they been re-elected, and therefore this demonstrates, their claim to superior budget management. I mean, they're making a very serious political claim based on what you're now saying are numbers that we shouldn't put too much stock in. We should be very careful about drawing inferences from.
You've got 2 minutes.
I think the distinction that so governments often compare outcomes to earlier budgets, like in terms of what has been the change in the underlying cash balance between, for example, PFO and the latest budget. Those comparisons are factual comparisons as to what has been.
That's exactly what I was trying to do. What are the cumulative impact of decisions made by this government compared to the trajectory that they say they inherited from the previous government? That's all I was trying to do, and it shows that the net effect of decisions taken in the last financial year was to push the budget into a $12 billion deficit with what otherwise could have been a $10 billion surplus, because in net terms they spent $22 billion last financial year as a result of decisions taken.
So I think the concern I have, Senator, just to be open with you, is it's the inference, it's the counterfactual. What would have otherwise happened? Now, the projections for the budget at PFO in 2022 were the projections for the underlying cash balance and all of the lines at that point.
Sure, but that's exactly my point about the government's claims. They're using a counterfactual as well. And they're using a very pessimistic counterfactual, which was at the end of COVID, which had very modest assumptions about returns to growth and revenue, which have been massively exceeded in reality. We've discussed that with your officials as well. It's, I think, $370 billion in gross terms, about $270 billion in net terms of additional revenue collected compared to what was forecast in 2022. And it also doesn't take into account decisions that might have been made by those governments had they been re-elected. So it's literally exactly the same. Counterfactuals being compared.
So I don't think I would. I mean, it depends. So the the PFO and each budget presents the best estimate of what the trajectory for government spending and deficits is over the period ahead. I mean, that, like, unless you're going to say that every budget is a counterfactual. It is at that time what is the best estimate of the trajectory at that point. That's what the PFO was. That's different.
This will be my last question.
So that is different, I think, Senator, from saying if these decisions weren't taken, this is what the outcome would have been, which is what I thought you were inferring about the 24/5 outcome.
What I'm saying is that the rule has to be consistent for both parties here. We can either compare that baseline and the effect of decisions taken against it, as the government does, to claim credit for better economic management, in their words, or that's an unreasonable comparison that should not be made because these things are very hard to estimate. It can't be reliable and accurate when the government does it, but unreliable and dubious when the opposition does it.
I'm not saying that, Senator.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.